Hello, Yakri here with another artifact video. This time I want to talk about what changes in the most recent patch, 1.2, the only patch where we've had any, nerfs or buffs in artifact. What changes had the most impact on the artifact meta, in particular the constructed meta. I think it's a pretty interesting thing to go over. I've seen a few people unsure about what really went into, in particular, the rise of Monoblue. So we're going to be talking about Monoblue deck, the Monoblue deck a lot. There are a few different versions of it, of course. If you're curious, I recommend looking up Swim's version or looking up the Seed Story top 8, which had Swim running a version of it and Hyped running a version of it, and Hyped, of course, actually won. So those are some pretty good iterations of the deck. And basically, the reason it's so good, I think I agree with Swim made a statement saying he thought it was, obviously he ran it before these patch changes came out, I believe. So he thought it was kind of sleeper good, and that's probably accurate, having now played it myself a fair bit. And then these changes just kind of really sent it over the top in terms of overall power level. And I've seen a few people saying that maybe it's a little overrated. I don't think that's actually true. I think maybe people will come up with some ways to counter it, and that whatever counters it will get a little bit popular, and it'll be in a better, the meta will be in a better place overall. But the deck is fundamentally good because it has so many lines of play at any given moment, and that's really what makes a good control deck. It gives you a lot of options for taking control of the game and kind of setting your tempo, not in the sense of a tempo deck, but the word, the usual English use of the word, for the course of a game. And yeah, so if you play it, you always feel like you have a lot of options, a lot of things you can do, and you don't get into a lot of situations where you just have to throw up your hands and be like, well, there's nothing I can really do here. And there are some other decks that are a little more high rolly, a little more or less reliable, don't have quite as many tools perhaps, and these decks are generally just not as good because you have to believe a little bit harder in the heart of the cards if you want to win with those decks versus with Monoblue. So yeah, Monoblue is very good. Anyway, point is, this is actually more about these changes right here that I have posted up. So it's a nice little PowerPoint slide video, my favorite kind of YouTube video to make. I know it doesn't really make sense, does it? I love PowerPoint slides though, and they're so easy to make. It's like writing light. Anyway, so the Axe nerf is more impactful than it looks. My next slide is all about that. Reducing Axe's attack is actually pretty key to helping Monoblue in particular, because two of the cards it already wanted to run, Zeus and Ogre Magi. Magi? I think it's Magi is the most correct. Well, whatever. There's a few ways to pronounce it. Ogre Magi, because they have 7 health, and if Axe faces them, he just kills them. And more importantly, if you can't get any items onto them, on turn 6, Axe can duel them, and they're gone, right? And so this gives any deck, including red, fewer options for killing these cards. Now you can run Legion Commander and Bristleback, but what if you want a third red hero? You'd really like to run Axe as your third red hero. The other options aren't too appealing. I can't remember if there's Ursa. Ursa is the other hero who has 7 attack, but you probably don't actually want to run Ursa because his signature card is kind of lame. It's not terrible, but it's not what you'd like to have. You'd really like to have Berserker's Call if you're going for that third red hero, especially. And so now you can't have that and have a great flop and easy duel victories, right? So it makes a fairly big difference. The -1 HP, some edge cases where that matters, but it's not too big of a deal. It does make Axe just a little bit easier to kill when you're trying to work around his armor and get him without an actual condemn effect. So it does help as well. But basically, this just makes red weaker, and kind of the control counter is supposed to be something like black-red hero killer, and it just makes that deck not as good as it was before. And before, at least versus control, it was probably perfectly fine. As it was. And now the next thing is cheating death is just, it's dead. I'm not going to list the effects of current cheating death. Suffice it to say, it's not worth running anymore. At least not in the sense of it doing anything against a control deck like Monoblue. And before, it's not necessarily, how to put it, it's not necessarily the fact that Monoblue had a bad matchup against this that mattered. It did, right? But what mattered was that because decks might run this, if Monoblue was popular, you couldn't really run Monoblue. At least people weren't. in no small part because of this factor, right? If people are if just getting annihilated is just a huge deal, and you can't really win games without blocking annihilation somehow, people would start running cheating death, because that sort of meta would influence its value, right? Now, we didn't really have a meta like that. We did, of course, had Mayo Storm making getting annihilated a real possibility, but they have their own issues with annihilating themselves. They don't want to do it at certain times, so it wasn't as big of a deal with them. They couldn't do it as reliably or as easily or care as little about doing it. And I think the same kind of goes for a lot of the other decks that used it. And there were some other control decks, right, including blue, that would use a lot of annihilation, but they didn't really see the level of popularity that would have seen an upshoot in cheating death usage. So this is kind of just existing is an oppressive factor, and now it's gone. So Gust is another big thing, because green just kind of got gutted in terms of its options for like proactively and retroactively dealing with shit. All it can really do is now buff stuff and play creeps. Not that that's totally useless. Green has some good cards. It's got ramp too, actually. Sorry, can't forget ramp. And ramp, by virtue of accelerating, can be quite good versus control and stuff. Decks that need to hit a certain amount of mana before they're good, because you can just hit the amount of mana you need to be good first and beat them. Of course. However, this was a big deal because it makes playing against any deck that's including green safer, right? The inclusion of Drow just constantly, all the time, meant that initiative was this kind of knife fight, and if you didn't have initiative, there's mostly likely you're just going to get gusted, right? If that's a possibility for that deck, and then you can't drop Annihilation or whatever big spell it is. Maybe Bolt of Damocles later in the game and just win the game because that Gust threat is there. But without that, there aren't really a lot of options besides like Annihilation itself to shut out a lane. There's like enough magic, Annihilation, and everything else can be preemptively countered, I think. I guess, no, and even Gust with Jasper Daggers, we're going to get to it in a sec, even Gust and Stun, basically everything but Annihilation and enough magic you can get through. Kicking units to other lanes can also avoid this problem. So the issue here is that, before you need to land some key spell to win the game. Well, green, and any deck that includes green, has this option to deal with decks that rely on dropping big fat spells, which included more things than just Annihilation, but it also included Annihilation, Bolt of Damocles, and even stuff like going into combos like multiple Thunder God's Wrath and stuff like that, right? And I guess you can just shut that down. Now, can't really do it. Jasper Daggers are a thing that exists, so they can counter even the weaker effective Gust, and blue loves going wide board, so it's very, very unlikely that you can actually stop them with Gust in its current incarnation in the first place. So it's kind of dead as a counter, or as even a sticking point for these decks, right? It's not really something that on its own was keeping Monoblue out of the meta, or even would have stopped people from playing Monoblue and it being successful, but it's something that would have somewhat of a good matchup versus Monoblue because it's a problem for the player who's playing a kind of deck that drops those big bumps. And now it doesn't exist, so you don't have to worry about it as much. You can think like, okay, well, now before, there's one more spell that I don't have to worry about blowing up my heroes if I put them in a lane. Now, if I'm versus a green-red deck now, I don't really, or even a green-black deck, for example, really anything other than including blue, all I really had to worry about is Gust, because other things can be solved by dropping two heroes in a lane, right? Especially if there's minions there. The heroes land far apart, so you can't get both of them with Berserker's Call. There isn't any removal that just nails two heroes far apart. You would have to have some overwhelmingly powerful board clear or Gust, right? And so those decks would have Gust as an option before, and now they got nothing. So even if you don't have initiative, you can drop those two heroes, you get your key Annihilation that's going to stop you from losing the game, or your Bolt of Damocles that's going to instantly win the game for you no matter what they do, unless it's enough magic. Incidentally, enough magic, probably more valuable than it used to be now. So yeah, it just reduces the options to counter these sorts of plays that include a lot of what Monoblue does. It's not the only deck that benefits from this, of course. However, it was something that was probably pretty good before any of these changes happened. Okay, Jasper Daggers, they went down to 5 gold. It's probably too cheap. Purging effects, enemy effects on equip. It's so useful. So, let's put it another way. If it didn't purge effects, 5 gold Jasper Daggers is probably okay. It's probably a decent item. It maybe was a little underrated before at 7 gold, but it was probably not good. But at 5 gold, it's amazing how much of a difference that makes. It's really close to the cost of a short sword, and it pierces armor. And so if you think you're going to be seeing a lot of armor, it's probably just a better short sword. And if you don't really need that extra tiny bit of gold, you're going to run Jasper Daggers. But it purges enemy effects too, so you can't accidentally purge your own buffs like Time of Triumph. It pierces through stuff like multiple Vestures of the Tyrant. It kills heroes through stuff like Time of Triumph. I've won at least one game already because I Berserkers called 3 Time of Triumph heroes and they all just exploded. One hero was a bristleback who had like a stupid amount of attack, but he wasn't even close to killing any of them unless they don't have any armor, effectively. In which case, yeah, I got rid of all of them and won the game. No problem. So it's very good. And then the fact that you can also purge off stun, you can purge off silence, whatever the hell you want. You can purge off disarm. It's so versatile and it's so unilateral, right? It's just like, nope, fuck your mechanic, whatever it was that you did to debuff my hero, it's gone, routed, gone. And it's so cheap. And because all decks can include it, it's just huge oppressive meta effect. More than probably Cheating Death had, and one that benefits decks like Blue, right? Because Blue doesn't disable you; it fucking kills everything, right? Right? Annihilation, boom, the whole board's blown up. Like an 8 charge Eclipse, it's piercing damage, boom, the whole board's blown up. Whereas other decks do care about debuffing you, right? Like Blue-Red Control. All right, there's a good use for Routed. They care about debuffing you. What about like playing cards like Ursa, playing cards like Bristleback? It's actually the colors it's like green. No, wait, does green have debuffs? No, it's like black and red, right? Black and red that debuff you mostly. Well, largely red actually. And so basically colors that are good, that were kind of good versus blue, sort of, or could be used to assemble decks that are good versus like mono blue, and decks similar to mono blue got nerfed, and mono blue was left untouched. So now it went from probably a little more reasonable to overpowered. Now let's go through the other, since I've prepared all these illustrations, let's go through the information that I couldn't just store in my head relevant to the previous points I've covered. So these are the heroes Axe used to be able to kill, and he doesn't kill them anymore. Earthshaker, Ogre Magi, Zeus, Drow, Rix, Bloodseeker, because he also got an HP buff, and Bounty Hunter. So this does make black better, noticeably. Doesn't affect green, except for Rix, actually, so Rix and Drow, yeah, it totally affects green, sorry. But it affects blue a lot, because Ogre Magi and Zeus are like top-notch blue heroes, especially Ogre Magi. He's very, very good. Zeus can be a little more situational. If you're only including like 2 blue heroes, you're not sure if you're including Zeus, but he's good. And Axe can't kill him anymore. This is just it's not a huge influence, right? It's not like a massive difference all of a sudden. Axe doesn't kill Zeus and Ogre Magi. Like the first round of the game isn't that hugely impactful. And this is also incidentally mostly about losing these units to duel on like round 3 or 4, basically, yeah. And not so much on the flop, but for econ decks, it does matter that you can't kill them on the flop anymore with Axe. So this is a buff to blue, mostly because the 2 heroes that they got changed were already quite good, and a slight buff to black. It's probably not a buff to green really at all, because Drow got shit on so hard, and Rix, well, we'll see next expansion, but he's still not great yet. You could include him in a deck, but I'm very skeptical as to whether or not he's like, I'm going to put this guy in some top tier deck, partly because I wouldn't put green in a top tier deck right now, just saying. So, no Cheating Death. I already covered most of this, but the meta for board clear is just better without Cheating Death in existence. And the important thing to reiterate, it's not that any of these differences are like, well, if Cheating Death was back to the way it was, this would all be fixed. It's just that these things added together make a significant difference. And I'm also, incidentally, in case anyone just misconstrues this, I'm not saying Cheating Death should go back to the way it was before. It sucked. Not from a balance perspective, but from an enjoying the game perspective, it was like orders of magnitude worse than all the other types of RNG that are in this game. And I don't think the RNG part served a useful design purpose. It was just like, we can't figure out a better way to balance this. Fuck. I do think that something like Cheating Death should exist, and it should not be random. It should be something that's a little more like cooldown based or high mana cost based. and something you can play preemptively, right? Big problem is like Hand of God. If you like read like, okay, I've got initiative, and actually this doesn't work versus Annihilation, does it? At any cost, for some reason, is coming down this turn. You Hand of God, you're protected, right? We need something that protects from condemn effects. It's not AoE, yeah, some kind of AoE, right? It doesn't have to hit the whole board, but at least like a unit in neighbors or something. Protects a few units and is preemptive and can be done like the round before, right? Like give 3 units a death shield forever, just. But that would have to be a one-off card, not an improvement or a very long cooldown or something. Anyway, that's kind of like a discussion for another time. The point is that since this is not in existence anymore, it makes including green even worse, and it makes playing blue even better, because blue has like a fuckload of board clear, and board clear is made better by this not existing. Even if you don't necessarily include that in the best decks, the counter meta decks that can beat your board clear deck, and so you're worried about those, and so you have to retech your board clear deck, which makes it weaker against the other deck. Anyway, yeah. So Gust is borderline useless. I don't know if I need to give this too much to talk about this too much, but the less value in running Drow is kind of a big thing actually, because you could run Drow with Axe, and then you can duel those 7 HP heroes and kill them. Before, of course, you could duel 8 HP heroes and kill them. So it's still less good because then there's a string of 8 HP heroes Axe can't kill with duel anymore, like Luna, very notably, or trade with on round 1 if you put Drow on the flop, right? So it makes things safer for blue. It makes things safer for every type of deck that wants to run lower HP heroes across the board, because there's a whole bunch of different trades that Drow put changes in your favor. And when she had a really good signature card, you would run her and you'd be like, all right, I'm great. I'm happy about getting those bonuses, right? But you probably, with not having a really strong signature card, you probably don't want to run her over some green hero that does have a good signature card. So again, I talked about the blue shutout threat of silencing everything, and how it makes it more of a possible thing to board clear without having initiative first, potentially. In the meta, Jasper Daggers, Tidehunter was probably viable, and definitely. Without Jasper Daggers, after the other changes, I'd say there's a pretty good chance of him becoming viable, because Kraken Shell's really good actually, and it's made better by all the other changes except Jasper Daggers existing, because Jasper Daggers means that Tidehunter's Ravage is shit. So bye Tidehunter, we almost had you in the meta. That would have been cool, kind of. So he's got so much HP, it's great. Anyway, so this mostly hits non-blue, right? Blue, like I said earlier, blue is a lot about blowing you the fuck up, and not that much about actually locking you down in a way that Jasper Daggers can counter, right? Not that it can't a little bit, but mostly not super about that, and you can build a great deck of blue cards completely not including that. Glyph of Confusion also has a lot more value than what you can get rid of with Jasper Daggers. Although I will say that I've been playing with one included for the mirror matchup, and I did in part win a game off of Jasper Daggersing a hero under Glyph of Confusion. So it still does make that worse. I just think it hits particularly red and green harder, red, green, and green harder, and black a little bit harder than it hits blue, and so it just exacerbates this like stacking set of problems that are just a little bit of minor improvements to a deck that was probably already good and just not being run in the meta for no particular reason. So yeah, I think that pretty much concludes it. That is why Monoblue is all over the place now, and what the patch notes changes did for the most part, in my opinion. I don't think it's too crazy of an opinion. I'm sure some people will disagree with me a little bit, but I thought I would present it in one spot, because I think for a lot of people who, how do I put it, were not obsessively paying attention to all of the tournaments and every fucking tiny detail about artifacts, you may not have known why suddenly there's fucking blue decks everywhere. So this is why. There you go. And I will talk to you all next time. Yakri out.